because we're all looking for something that some fundamentally feel that we've lost. We're all trying to find that, and often we try to find it in the arms of somebody else that can make us feel better about that feeling of loss and feeling of there's some part of us that we're trying to rediscover.
Hey everyone, welcome to the first episode of the You versus You podcast, where I talk with members of the Human Council and the connected community about how we can expand our minds and recode our reality. Hey Simon, thank you so much for joining me today, and David and Kern. So I thought, Simon, we can first talk a little bit about you, as you're part of the council since December 2019. Can you give us a short introduction about your life path before you joined?
Of course, it's a true pleasure. So I followed the path of finance for more than 14, 15 years until I resigned last year. So I've been working in investment banking. I studied finance, took a job. I started working during studies, and initially it was kind of very exciting. There was a lot of learning, a lot of very challenging environment. Was high stress, high pressure, a lot of responsibilities from the start on. So it was really fun. But then over the last years, it stagnated a little bit. There was not so much intellectual stimulation anymore. Also, it was not it kind of was but also a change in priorities, or maybe also getting to a point where we're kind of waking up a little bit. Now that main motivation for where I was in life was achieving things, but then also questioning, okay, why do I want to achieve that in the first hand? And initial wake-up call was when my father died in 2010 from cancer, and that was kind of was questioning everything. Everybody in my family has cancer. Almost everybody died from cancer or Alzheimer. So it's kind of this was kind of the first point in my life where I was questioning, and also kind of waking up a little bit from the life I have been living. And first it was panic. Yeah, oh man, I don't want to have cancer myself, and it seemed like a predefined path for me too, because everybody else had cancer. So I was starting to read and research and looking at what I possibly could do to not have cancer.
Were you then afraid to die in that moment as well?
It was horrible in terms of experiencing, for example, how my father died from cancer, and it was a very long, slow process, and that was, in the end, it was a really sad experience, but then also it was really a wake-up call, and also it was the initiation to work or do something also for the relationship with my parents. So also if I go back further in my past, I have been always very, very shy and depressed and social phobic even. And when my father died, that was kind of the first time in my life that I questioned, maybe it's not normal, maybe I can do something to have a better, that was when my father was diagnosed with cancer. That was okay, life seems to be short. Yeah, what happens if he dies, and we never try to fix what there possibly is to fix. And so when he was diagnosed with cancer, that was kind of already the process to start looking at the problems, or discovering also that maybe it's not normal to just have the situation I was in, but maybe I can do something to improve it. And so my father died in January 2010, and the Christmas before, it was the first time that I can remember that I had a good time at home. And so it was both very sad, but also really nice, because it was the catalyst to improve the relationship to my parents. And but then it was like I got obsessed with what can I do to improve my health and to not get cancer. That was the first step.
And what changed in your thought process for the first time that you could really enjoy this Christmas? So what was really different?
It was realizing that so the perception, and like it's also what we are doing now, like in a complete different dimension. But it was the first time realizing that basically the way I perceived the world is my subjective perception, and if I perceive my parents not like in that specific case not giving me what I wanted, that didn't necessarily mean that they came from a place of love. That they basically was the first realization. Okay, they did their best, or they did what they could, and it did not receive me like in the way I hoped to receive it. And that was kind of like when it started to realize that that you're not reality is very subjective. Mm-hmm. and there are tools, ways to change the way you see the world, and that basically it's in your hands also to improve your quality of life. But at that time it was like I had no clue. It was just like, okay, there's something, like I can do something, or there's something to improve, but there was no idea how and what like possibly I could do. It was more like getting a glimpse. Yeah, also like at that time, I went to therapy, like, and that was also kind of being exposed to how you learn, modeling your surrounding. Like it's kind of like it was more like what was what made me curious was more like a scientific background, explaining, okay, like there are pathways, circuits like activated in your brain, they trigger a certain reaction within you, and that's basically from your like built upon your past experiences, but then that's just because of your past. So you can train a new reaction in your mind, and so behavioral therapy was it called. And for example, by going into situations which made you uncomfortable, or like you could kind of rewire your brain. That was the first time I ever heard about that. You really like have the power to influence your experience directly.
David, can you share with us if you also had a similar experience, that you really had a wake-up call or experienced a shift in perspective?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm David, and I'm just like Kern and Simon. I'm one of the partners on the human blockchain. And so I would say I've spent a lot of hours, days, weeks in the water, because I used to swim, and we swam competitively. And, you know, one of the first times when I started to realize, I was only when I was 24, that was in the Olympic year, 2012. And I had the opportunity, all of us actually at the University of Virginia, we had the opportunity to go see a sports psychologist. And, you know, some people took that offer and they went once a week. And basically, you know, the cool thing was it didn't matter if you had a flu, if you were dead tired from workouts, you could just go there, you sit on the couch, and you have a 1-hour conversation with the sports psychologist. And he, you know, just by talking, I felt like these knots that I had, these blocks, they started to go away. One of the things that I used to have was in competition when I was not fully rested. Well, the others weren't fully rested either, but they somehow managed to swim better in these competitions. And when I saw a guy next to me swimming faster in competition, I would think, I got to be doing bad. I got to be bad. And then it started to hurt, and I went slower, and the time sucked. So I could do it well under pressure, but I couldn't do it well during the year, which was important as well. And so those knots started to go, and really I started to perform better, not just in the races, but also in training. And I was like, holy shit, this works. But I always was under the impression that it was like he was doing therapy work with me. It felt like he was treating me, it wasn't really coming from me. I always thought, okay, he can do that with me because he's a professional and all that. And so I kind of put it under a rug as, okay, it was available when it was, and now it's not anymore. So then I was conditioned into, I was to study finance, and I was in America. I was behind in school a little bit because all my, not workmates, but my classmates, they had internships in New York with the big banks while I was swimming. And it's like, oh, I got to make money. And so that happened, finance school, finance books, finance classmates, all that, like America, capitalism, conditioning. And that's what I thought I needed to do. And when I got the opportunity, I jumped into banking. And then, as with most people, what happened is something bad had to happen. And, I thought I was doing really well. Everybody loved me, but then my boss didn't promote me 2 times in a row, while other people, Simon will know that, remember that, while other people, left and right were promoted. And I was like, okay. So for some reason, everybody likes me, but still because one guy doesn't like me or doesn't appreciate it, so I don't get promoted and I'm stuck and I get angry. And I started to realize that. I started reading self-development books, and I this stuff worked. So I did feel better after writing down goals. And so I quit the job. I went to another one, which was amazing compared to that. But still, then another thing happened when, I told you the story when they didn't give a guy, after he got his second child, they didn't give him a 1-month unpaid vacation to help at home because the wife was sick. And I was like, okay, it's the same principle. It's not the guy, not my boss, because my boss liked me very much and we got along, but it's the bank as a whole that doesn't give a damn about you, really. So, and then I quit again. And so, the universe has its funny ways, but when you start looking, the opportunities are always around us, and it's just a question if we can see it. And once we put ourselves in that mindset, we can see it. And, it goes back with Simon. He's had more from the cancer. And I remember Simon and I, we talked about, what is good to eat, how much supplements you have to, he knew all of this, but in the end, it's like all that empowering belief that we can do it from within, from ourselves. So I was looking at it like with my goals and how to channel the energy. And then maybe Simon was more looking into what to eat, but it's all the same thing. And then basically we met Kern and then everything changed after that, because Kern had the vision and he knew much more about it. But it just happened that Simon and I we're looking for the opportunities, and then that one came along. And
Kern, when you met Simon and David, can you tell us a little bit about the vision that you had that David mentioned?
Yeah, that's a good question. I had a vision about creating something that was a fully autonomous situation, that people could develop their consciousness by training each other across the world with a view to interfacing with artificial intelligence in a super creative way. That was probably maybe 10, 15 years ago. The first time I saw that was when I was at an event with a guy called Richard Bandler, who was teaching NLP. And there was about 1,000 people in the room, and they were all very happy. They were all super motivated. They were all going, we can change the world. And they were learning a process called NLP. And then they all left that particular auditorium and all went out and bought business cards and competed against each other. So it was kind of a hypocrisy, a contradiction that I could see at the time, and felt that if there was 1,000 people in a place that could honestly want to work together, then the world could change. But they had to have a structure and a mechanism to be able to do it. They had to be able to step out of the money trap, which is where everyone is locked in because they have to pay the bills and they have to basically service the man, which is the pyramidal structure that we're confined in. So once that was it, that was the first idea. And then starting over the years, working through, I started a practice in hypnosis, NLP, cognitive behavioral therapy years ago, and then started working with the mind and how people were creating their own reality. And there were two identities in people, and there was the core and there was the shell, and pretty well everyone was in the shell trying to react to the life that they were in, and they weren't in a thinking state. They were basically fully on autopilot. And this is difficult for any person to get, that they are asleep. And we are all asleep. We're just at different stages of waking up, but everyone will egotistically go, well, I'm awake. And that's really the problem. If there was a core problem, we all think we're awake, but we're really asleep wherever we are. And when we take 2 steps forward from A to B, we think B is all that there is, but there's the rest of the alphabet and the universe to discover. but we keep locking down with where we think we are on the corridor to enlightenment. So really, that's the start. That's the thing. And over the last 10 years, I guess I've studied social development, personal development, consciousness. I moved into consciousness more than anything, how the brain works and how we are part of the environment that we're in, how everything that we think and how everything that we speak actually creates the world that we're in, and we share a reality with all other people within a frequency band, and it's a frequency bandwidth, and only through expanding that bandwidth can we start to really engage with the world as it could be and should be. But it's a constant challenge because we are all infected with a social virus that pulls us back, brings us back down, comes to get us all the time, pull us back into the cave, so we can't really think in the expansive and creative ways we were designed to do. So it's a difficult journey. It's not easy for anybody, but in the end of the day, it's one that is worthwhile every step of the way.
As you mentioned also before, that we're stuck in a system also because of the money trap. Because as you say, we have to pay our bills at the end of the month, and it's really hard, to see an alternative to a full-time job at a corporate company in most cases. So how do you think can we really break through that? Because that's very hard.
Okay, well, the first thing is you have to realize that the asset of you is not your CV. It's not your, for example, your training in doing a project manager's role or a chemist or anything like this, because ultimately your whole life is geared around whether someone wants you, not what you want to do. And you're trading this thing that you've learned, and it wasn't the thing that you were designed to learn. At 5, if you ask your 5-year-old self what you were designed to do, it's highly unlikely to say what you're doing now. It really is the transition from where you are now back to your 5-year-old self that was limitless in its creativity and innovative capability. It's that is really the journey that you can then trade. And if you learn that journey and you go on it, and once you've started on it, then you can teach other people that journey. And in that learning about yourself, it's something that's archetypal. And if you start to understand it in detail, you can train other people in it. So then you can step out of the corporate trap. Then you can start to work in what's called the collaborative and the co-creative, because you shift your mentality from an I focus, working within that pyramidal structure, basically about getting as much apples as you can for you and your family and your future around about within that system, which is only ever going to give you a certain part of the pizza, to stepping out and going, okay, well, there's a whole big world here that I could actually start to work and gain a much better feeling with and a much better collaboration with. And that is really what we created with the human blockchain structure. It was a way of giving someone a fully autonomous income by actually working with somebody else and training somebody else on a trainer situation. It's not pyramidal or, for example, multi-level marketing or anything like that. It's just simply where you train someone and then mentor them. And through that facility, by working in the collective, you can leverage certain facilities. Like you can get an income from training someone, you get an income from mentoring someone, you get an income from helping other people achieve their goals as a collective in all sorts of ways. So now you don't have to rock up for work anymore. Now you don't have to worry about, as David said, someone promoting you to get you somewhere. Now you don't have to worry about the pressures of what other people think about you. Now it's all about starting to develop yourself. And the more you develop yourself, the more you have to trade with another person and help them further along the line. And if you can do that, then you'll make a considerable income.
And what it all comes down to is consciousness. So Simon, maybe can you give us an overview of how your image change of consciousness and how you define it since you met Kern and David?
Good question. So I had some experiences before where it became obvious that this 3D reality here is not all there is. So that was not really a question, but it was more a question, okay, what's the whole point of this existence in a way? And also like on the one hand, and that was also one of the reasons that I resigned ultimately, like we can quickly share because that kind of like gives also a bigger picture to what we do. So the last years I've been working in banking, and my wife is from Mexico. She has friends from Venezuela, and the situation there was and still is quite challenging. And like just before I resigned, the father of a friend died because they had no dialysis bags in the hospital, and he had diabetes. So something which would cost something like 10 cents, also ridiculous. Yeah? So he died because it was not existent there. And that was quite emotional because it was like a person we had a direct relation to, and was very different to listen to the news from television or newspaper where you read it and it's not my problem. It's like somewhere else and I cannot do anything about it. Yeah? And in that situation, it was kind of emotional because it was a direct friend experiencing this. And then at the same time, and it was the same week, funnily, there was another article about Swiss private banks like operating in the gray, enabling elite, in that case, Venezuelan elite, bringing billions of money out of the country in the future. Just start reading a little bit. It's quite obvious that it's like maybe not the most, not necessarily earned in the most transparent way. Yeah, and that was kind of like another aha moment where it was okay. I might not be legally responsible, but kind of operating in this system, being part in this process. I'm kind of supporting the structures which we have on this globe, which kind of manifest this injustice and this inequality. And that was like a moment which was quite tough and kind of like made me question everything I did. And part of making the decision to resign from that environment without really having a clue what then to do. And funnily, like when I resigned, I jumped on the next vehicle to provide certainty, achieve something, started an own company. And to come back to your question, how I would define consciousness, we are all consciousness. It's us. There's like this perceived separation between you and me is an illusion, and there are moments where basically you can okay. I'm still learning to put this into words. Yeah. So so basically we are all consciousness, and then you could, for example, imagine you have a filter between you and what you perceive, and this filter generates this illusion of separation. And then you can, for example, use this concept, and that becoming more aware, becoming more conscious is kind of like removing that filter part for part, and like to discover like more of what is, see more of what is, understand the world in ever more like details, and also not just intellectualize it or talk about it, that we all like from the same, but actually start feeling it and being part of everything. And it's like for me, like if we talk about becoming more conscious, it's seeing more of what there is and getting more objective from one's own subjective classes, and like kind of like moving out of the vehicle, mind, body, into a higher perspective, like becoming the observer of this experience here, but also being more aware that in a way it's an experience. It's like we are not this vehicle, we're the driver, having experience to it. Does it make sense to you?
It does make sense. So I'm also curious, because you mentioned consciousness is that we're actually all one, so we're not separate, we're all connected. David, were there any moments in your life where you especially felt that?
I've had one incident a couple months ago where I was daydreaming. I mean, I was awake, I was here, and I had pictures came in my mind all of a sudden, and they were from kids around the world, and that was quite impactful. It was but that was really the only one. Other than that, I hear very spiritual human beings speak about it, and I ask questions as much as I can, and there's so many people independently speaking of it that I'm sure there's truth to it. So I'm trying to find it, but then again, it's the same. It's a process, and it's the more you look for it, the more likely, I guess, I'll be to come in those experiences and really find what I'm looking for.
Kern, would you like to add something about consciousness?
Well, we all have it, we hope. Otherwise, it's just a dream. Consciousness is something that we are on. We're all connected, but you can feel, if you ask David, have you ever felt, that consciousness, that connectivity? We all feel it every day because we're all looking for something that some fundamentally feel that we've lost. We're all trying to find that, and often we try to find it in the arms of somebody else that can make us feel better about that feeling of loss and feeling of there's some part of us that we're trying to rediscover. And that part of us we're trying to rediscover is our higher levels of consciousness that are connected to a universal field. The more we are presented with who we think we are, i.e. society tells us to be a certain person within society, educationally and employmentally, then you start to become that identity and you forget who you really are and that connectivity. And really it's a rediscovery of that. It's having to think your way out of the maze that has been adopted by your mind to think you are the mind and the body, but you're not, and you think you are the identity. So consciousness is a kind of a ladder to climb, which doesn't really have an end to it. It's almost like the first position is going, with David and Simon, spending years in the bank, thinking in a certain way. So it's really sort of like thinking their way out of all those thoughts that have been established. And many of them are obviously unconscious, and trying to get back to the original core and then start to develop in the way that they should to connect with this flow state that David is talking about, which lots of spiritual people will mention. They'll mention that they don't have to really think, and they're downloading all the time and uploading to the greater consciousness, the collective mind. And really that's what we're all, once you get that feeling of joy and fulfillment and peace, then you're starting to feel that nothing is worth being afraid of. Nothing is really important. The financial implications tend to go away. The sort of self-love need tends to be just there. You don't have to worry about anything anymore. And that's what really consciousness is all about. So we're really trying to find what we've lost is the answer to it. And that's the path to consciousness.
Let me add something here for consciousness, because as you say, like how we've lost it and trying to find it. Okay. So look, we've been saying that toxic stress and fear, these basically they do create that famous flight, freeze, or flight,
fight,
freeze, or fight responses, right? So here's the thing. If you have an animal that is chasing you, all like human beings and animals, they're capable of generating this stress reaction, okay, with more blood pumps into the muscles, more into your senses. So that's okay. But now imagine you're backed against a cave, and that like a wild animal is waiting outside that cave for you. So what happens is, if you can't go out and you're in prolonged times of stress, what happens is that your body, your brain will focus on the 5 senses that you have, because these are the ones how you can decode reality in that dangerous moment. So if you have that over time, and imagine somebody else comes into you're gonna feel probably not very spiritual to that person, but very, there's another person, I can hug him, we can be together, we can, it's very primitive in a sense. So if you're stuck in that cave for a long time, and I repeat, this can look objectively that maybe there's only like a freaking mouse outside of the cave, but if that person is so scared of mice, then that's big for that person. So if you say take a person in daily life that is doing daily checklists, and from the outside it's like, oh, just relax, do it tomorrow, why do you even do checklists? But that person, for her or him, it's so real to check these marks every day, and there's so much stress created because of that that they're starting to decode reality only with the 5 senses. And so they focus on their eyes, what they can touch. And so all the spirituality, all that, like, you know, that last room, we said we have the mind, we have the body, and we have the spirit to go into a room where it's 360 degrees and holistic. That is completely missing. So when you like come out, you don't think about like being connected with, because it doesn't matter in that moment. And that's really what's going on with that golden cage. We're so in fear that we have to achieve and do this. And it's so real to us that we start to create these symptoms, and we become like, we literally only see it with those 5 senses, and we become materialistic. And so, and really that's where the consciousness, we had it, but it's gone because of the environment. And that's where, you know, it's very powerful when you can see that and start to work on it.
You mentioned the golden cage, and Kern mentioned that there's a maze and we have to find our way out of it. So what's the best way how we can start making our way out of the maze?
Wow, I think there's so many possibilities. You know, that's the beautiful thing. The journey, there is no best way. It's where you are. Like, curiosity helps, and if you can, you know, put your ego on a lower, how do you say, like, emergency level. Don't have it like here, defend everything, but like put it down and start to learn more about what you know other people know, and you know that you haven't heard of. It will start to come automatically. But I mean, that's for me, it's curiosity and the ego.
And Simon, how was it for you?
I would say the first step is to accept and realize that you don't know really a lot, that you're pretty ignorant, and that's not necessarily a pleasant realization at first, because like, okay, I thought I knew. Okay, not so cool. But then also, like, if you acknowledge to yourself that you don't really know a lot, it leaves so much room to expand. Yeah, and also like one of the really nice examples to make it a bit more visual or better to understand. You know, like if you imagine that with your 5 senses, you like decode, read a proportion of what is out there in terms of electromagnetic frequencies. It's not even 1% of frequencies we have access to with our 5 senses. Now, with our eyes, we see a part of the light spectrum. With our ears, we hear sound waves. But if you then look at other animals, they have access to other frequency bandwidth. So, like, just saying, like, we know very, very little of what there is. But then we run around and think we know. And the first step is to realize, like, or was for me to realize that, well, supposedly I thought I know, but I don't really know. And that was a tricky situation. But then also it's kind of like, cool. Okay, let me explore. And but then also, like, really important is to understand that everything you ever received in terms of information, basically also the belief systems you absorb, the conditioning, like you kind of like you absorb throughout your life in a passive state, like most of us, it comes from another human. Like, it doesn't matter if it's from government, if it's media, if it's religion, if it's family, and there's always humans involved. They have equal access as you to information out there. But then each of us, and you can just look at how you communicate with other people, or how you communicated in the past, or how people like, for example, in my work situation, each of us filters information in a way which, like, serves the purpose, yeah, and that that might be conscious but also unconscious. Like, just looking back at my work situation, I was like, everybody optimized a little bit for his own position. So information was shared, but not necessarily all information. And so you end up in a situation just saying, first of all, you don't know really a lot, but then also, like, you must realize that the information you received might not necessarily benefit you. And that like this realization is pretty profound, but because the implication then is that the only one who should define what like is in your operating system, your belief system, which creates your reality, like your beliefs create your thoughts, your emotions, your decisions, your actions, your results, your reality, meaning that wherever you are in life, the reality you're experiencing is dependent on what you believe. And then going back, accepting, okay, I don't know a lot. The information I receive might not necessarily be in my best interest. And it's on me to look at what I believe and then also define a belief system. We call it philosophical belief system, which serves my purpose, which creates the reality I want, and which explains what I can witness, which is progressive, which is fun, which is coherent, and that's really what we do is about, to guide people. Like I went through it, David went through it with Kern, guide people to a place where they see what they believe, and it's not so straightforward because each of us has a defense mechanism which protects what we believe. Freud called it shadow self. So kind of the guide helps you pull it away so that you can see what you believe, and you might argue in favor of your existing belief system, even it might not be helpful to your purpose, but that's how the defensive mechanism works. So it's like really like having a guide who holds you the mirror, pulls this belief, this protection away, so that you can see what you believe, and then start defining your own progressive philosophical belief system. And that's and that is at a core level. I think Kern talked before a little bit about the different identities, kind of this projected shell identity most of us run around with, kind of the result of all these layers of conditioning and absorbed beliefs. We end up with an identity like where we don't grasp anymore that we are connected. Like we relate to, okay, I'm 36-year-olds, I can do this, I cannot do this, I'm an ex-banker, but that's just an illusion. And going through this process, it's about like realizing that this is a freaking illusion, and getting to your core authentic identity and building your belief system based on your potential and not on your transient identity, which can change from moment to moment. And if you make that move, like if you start cutting the ties with this made up illusion, which is to be fair, it was quite a tricky phase, because the process then is to question everything you think and to start analyzing your thoughts and ask, why do I have this belief? Where does it come from? Whom does it serve? And we call it why behind the why. And once you look at your thoughts and you dig deeper, at the end you start to discover what you believe. And once you see what you believe, then you can set the intention, like, do I want to have this in my belief system or not? And if you don't, define a belief system which serves you. And one example that was one of the first when I started this process was before Christmas. So we were preparing Christmas cookies for my mother and my family. And I said, we need to hurry, we have no time. Yeah? And then Brenda, my wife, said, okay, why do you say this, Simon? And I was like, and then it's like, you don't want to think about this in the moment. Yeah. And you think, yeah, just say this. Yeah. Like it doesn't mean anything, but and that's the thing. Everything we say is a reflection of what we believe. In that case, like if I was like, okay, well, like, why do I say it? Why did I say this? And then at some point you realize that the underlying belief is, I need to produce something to be worthy and I have no time. And that's basically, that was in my operating system. And that shines through my life and to my reality, and then it's on me. Okay, maybe that's not so cool. Maybe I don't want to have this in my system, and this is really what this process is about too.
Yeah, beautiful. So if you want to find out more about how you can change your beliefs, then make sure to check out the councilforhumandevelopment.org, and please share this podcast with your friends on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter with the hashtag Council for Human Development.